Today's episode of Into Your Head, it's well underway now. In fact, it probably doesn't need one of these interludes. It was probably just as well. I didn't say it was an interlude, so I could easily use this as an ending or a beginning. If I use it as a beginning, then I can just feign ignorance. I can say, I haven't made the rest of the show yet, so I've no idea whether it's going to need interludes, but I'm doing them now. Because that's how it works sometimes here. If I have trouble getting going, I make the interludes first. I say, this is an interlude to today's episode of Into Your Head podcast. Hello. Of course, then I get myself into a mess. Because then I go, today's episode of Into Your Head, it's not really underway at all, to be perfectly honest. I haven't recorded any of it yet. In fact, I've resorted to recording an interlude to something that doesn't exist yet, or to something that is substandard and will probably end up being deleted, but the interlude will still exist. And of course, that doesn't help, because that makes me go, this isn't going to work. It's a shitty interlude to a shitty thing. I suppose it will work out fine if I decide the thing to which I'm making the interlude is dispensable, so we'll make a new thing later. But then we'll also make a new interlude. That's the problem then. That's going to be like science and biology and stuff, they'll tell you. Nearly every cell in your body regenerates. The you who you were 30 years ago, every inch of that body is being replaced and regenerated since then. You're not the same person you were when you were 8. You even have a whole new set of teeth. And that's exactly what it is with this. If I make an interlude to something, and the something that I'm making the interlude to is substandard, so I replace the substandard material later, but then I also decide that the interlude is substandard and I make a new interlude, then I'm making a new interlude to a new thing. That's like replacing every inch of it, so it's a whole new thing. And of course, the problem with replacing every cell in your body is that you have a whole new body every 10 years or whatever they say. I presume they say it's every 10 years or something. You have a whole new body. Every brain cell gets replaced. Except your brain cells. Those don't get replaced. They just die off, we're supposed to believe. That's clearly a lie. They're trying to trick us into looking after our brain cells by telling us, for some reason, you get new teeth and new cells of every bone in your body. Your skin replaces itself every 5 weeks or something. But they expect you to believe every brain cell you kill off, that's not going to grow back or get replaced. That's clearly bollocks. They're trying to trick us into looking after our brains. And then they also tell you, look after your teeth. Look after your teeth. It's very important to look after your teeth. And we nag our children. Well, those of us who have children, which I don't. But I was a child. I may not be a parent, but I have first-hand experience of having been a child. So don't tell me I don't know about children. I was a child once. I was a child, and I had a full set of teeth, and I was told, you have to look after these teeth. Clean them every day, go to the dentist, get painful surgery done on them by this dentist fella you bring your children to. He's no better than the barbers who used to, it's like Sweeney Todd. He used to have these barbers in the 1800s who would do minor surgery as well. And your dentist is a bit like that. You bring your children to them because you want them to look after their teeth. But then you get to 7 or 8 and suddenly you're told you get a whole new set of teeth. So these teeth you've been looking after for 8 years, doesn't matter at all. You get a whole new set. You should have spent the first 8 years of your life enjoying every type of sugar you could get your hands on. You should have enjoyed every type of sugar in existence. You should have drank syrup every day. Drank that stuff that the Americans like to put on their breakfast. What's that thing? You know this stuff. They pour it onto pancakes. You should be drinking pints of that for breakfast with sugar in it. That's what you should give your kids for breakfast, because understandably people don't like to give their children coffee. But if they're still on their first teeth, you can give them other things that they can enjoy that they won't be able to enjoy later in life without dental damage. Give them stuff that rots their teeth. They're going to get a whole new set of teeth before they're even teenagers. So it's perfectly fine. Don't go telling them look after your teeth. No. And this is exactly why Willy Wonka's father was a dentist and he used to nag him and they show him as a demon. Because people who nag their children about their teeth are demon scum. They turn you into a really bad Willy Wonka played by Johnny Depp. Is that what you want your child to grow up to be? No. Don't be like the nagging father who's a dentist. It's perfectly fine. They can rot their teeth. That's what they're for.
Into your head, into your head, into your head, into your head, into your head.
We've a lot to get on with today. Items that need to be attended to, issues that need to be addressed, topics. Oh, topics. We've got lots and lots of topics. We're positively booming to the seams with topics. We've got topics coming out of this microwave. This microwave. Can't really see it. It's over there. I'm not going to turn and pick it up. Last week, I was doing a thing where I was moving my head around and enjoying how it sounded. I listened back during the editing process and it didn't work out well at all. It was too quiet. So no, I'm not going to be doing that. An old broken microwave. I'm using it as a table beside me. It's on its end. If you put a microwave in portrait mode, you may have a taller table than you would if you put it in landscape mode. You're also less likely to trip over it if you're me. I suppose I could also use it as a stool. But why would I do that? I've got a perfectly serviceable chair here. There's a perfectly serviceable chair here. It works perfectly fine. Why would I sit on a microwave? Maybe when the chair breaks. Or if the chair is in danger of breaking, I suppose I could put the microwave under it to somehow reinforce it. I don't think it would fit though. Also, my mouth hurts. And that's not from going once upon a time there was a dog. A dog, as I enjoy doing sometimes. Oh, my mouth hurts because there's a spot or something on the inside of it. A spot or a scrape or something. Something has happened to my mouth for which I have no explanation. Not that I should have to provide an explanation. It's my mouth. My mouth. It's not like even if I was in rental accommodation and a landlord came to do an inspection, I wouldn't expect him to comment on the inside of my mouth. Maybe they could comment on the space inside my mouth, but not the actual flesh or the shape of it. If you're a landlord and you go through all the proper paperwork and stuff and you request an official inspection of the rental property, I suppose you'd be well within your rights to inspect the inside of someone's mouth. If they refuse to vacate that space so that you can inspect that part of the apartment. Part of the apartment, by definition, if you're inside the apartment, part of the apartment is inside your mouth at any time that you're occupying space in the apartment. So they're entitled to inspect the apartment, so I suppose that might be reasonable. But you could just move to say, I want to inspect this little bit of space here now, that's just where the inside of your mouth is. Surely you just go, okay, I'll just move over to the left here now. You can see that space. And then they'll say, but now you're occupying that other space. And you'll say, okay, well, I'll move over again when you get to this space. I need to see an overall view of all of the space in this room so I can inspect it properly. Because you could be just looking after one tiny bit of space at a time. And then when I move over, maybe you're concealing something. What would you be concealing though? Other than the inside of your mouth, which as we already established, they're entitled to see the space that's on the inside of your mouth, but they're not entitled to inspect the inside of your mouth. Unless one exception would be if there's teeth marks on the walls and they want to try and match it to your teeth. Surely they wouldn't be necessarily entitled to look at your teeth then. They'd be entitled, obviously, to request a mould of your teeth, see if it matches. Even then, there'd be paperwork for that, surely. Surely to Christ there'd be paperwork for that. I don't know. Luckily, I haven't had to rent anything in quite some time. Luckily. I presume at some point we're going to get to the point where nobody can afford a place to live. But some of the more lucky among them are still able to afford an address, which they use for correspondence and job seeking and things. So if that happens, the address you rent could be a piece of space inside an apartment that's just big enough to fit inside your mouth. And then you go up to the postman and you say, "Hello, can I have my post here? The address is the inside of my mouth." And then they'll say, "Okay, here's your post. Do I put it in here?" And you say, "No, thank you. You can hand it to me. Just treat it as if I happen to be standing outside my front door when you arrive." And then they'll say, "But you could be anyone. I don't know that you're the occupant of this mouth. You could be anyone. I'm sorry, I have to put the post right into the letterbox, i.e. the mouth, because otherwise I haven't delivered it." I suppose they have a point there. If you have a house and you happen to be out for a walk and you see the postman and he doesn't know you, and maybe you're 3 doors down, and you go up to him and you say, "Hello, I'm from that house over there. I'll take the post. Thank you very much. It'll save me having to go back and get it, because you're on your way out for the day." And then they'll say, "No, I'm sorry, sir. I don't know you. You could be anyone. How do I know you've come from that house? And even if you have, how do I know it's yours or that you live there?" You say, "I suppose." Well, in that instance, you'd also be able to, even if you own an address, if you own a house that you live in that instance, you'd also be able to register the inside of your mouth as a P.O. box. You'd say, "Hello, the inside of my mouth is my official P.O. box. So if you come across the postman in the street, you just supply the P.O. box number of your mouth, and then he checks it. Presumably he has a camera app and he scans your tongue or something so he can verify that it's a match. And then he gives you your post. Only if it's convenient. Because, of course, you can't be just approaching the postman when he's 2 blocks away from your house. Because this is what people do. They say, approach their postman. They see him 2 blocks away and they say, "Oh, hello, can I have my letters? I'm from that house down there, 3 rows down." And you expect them to dig. They have all their posts sorted in order because they're organised and a bit OCD, because that's their job. It's their job to be a bit OCD. So before they get on their bike, they arrange all their letter by house number. And if you approach them a couple of blocks away from your house, they have to dig deep into that pile. And it may be well organised, but they still have to find it. And in fact, if they're on a bike, they mightn't even have them. They stash their bags of letters in a locked box at the entrance to your estate now, so they may not even have your stuff on their bike yet. They're not training for some weightlifting thing. They're not going to go around with your post on the back of their bike when they're nowhere near your house. No. That's unreasonable. You're being unreasonable if you're expecting that of your postman or postwoman. Although maybe I don't know. But I suppose the point is, it wouldn't be unreasonable if you've paid for that service, in that you've paid to have a P.O. box address for the inside of your mouth. You'd be putting the postman to a bit of extra trouble, but he'd have paid for that. That would be the idea. It's a service economy. We pay extra for extra services. I suppose that would be reasonable. The young people probably don't see the value in having a P.O. box anymore. They say there's P.O. boxes all over the place where you go and post something. Why would I need another one where I receive something? Well, that's bollocks. That last minute or so of what I said makes absolutely no sense. And you can hear me trying to turn it into something that makes sense. It doesn't make any sense at all. The thing about the inside of your mouth, that makes perfect sense. But no, the last minute or so, no. We're going to scrub that. And we're going to scrub it properly this time. We're not going to leave in 5 minutes of me talking about the fact that I need to edit that out. No. 2 cats walk into a bar. One of the cats goes straight up to the bar counter and says, "Hello, can I have a pint of your finest Guinness, please? And please don't tell me what went on in the US election last night. I don't want to know. And the barman says, "Well, that's a very bury your head in the sand kind of attitude, if you don't mind me saying so." And the cat says, "Yes, I'm burying my head in the sand. I'm going to bury my head. In fact, I'm going to bury my whole body in the sand if necessary. I'm going to bury my whole body in the sand. Now, not that type of sand. Not littered sand, no. I'm talking about the kind of nice sand you get on a nice beach, or maybe in a desert if you're a camel. Now, obviously, I'm a cat, so if I'm in the desert, I'm going to have to mark what I use as my litter and what I use as my burying my head in the sand. Obviously, I'll have to demarcate it, but that's just like anyone else in the outdoors. Anyone who sets up a tent anywhere, sets up a camp, maybe if they're going up Mount Everest, when they have a camp, they very clearly mark where they're going to do their pissing and shitting and where they're going to do everything else. So that's perfectly normal. So if I'm a cat in the desert, I'll go, that's going to be the litter tray, that area of sand here. And over here, very far away from that and upwind from it, more importantly, is going to be where I bury my head in the sand. In the desert, burying your head in the sand may be the difference between survival and not survival, because your head is going to overheat in that sun. If you haven't found any water yet, you're overheating because you're dehydrated. Best thing you can do is get under the sand, bury yourself in a, don't call it a grave, because that won't help. Make sure you get well away from the burying your shit in the sand area and go to the burying your head in the sand area and go, this is where I keep my head. To keep it cool. To keep a cool head, I keep 100. Now, of course, that's not going to save you from dehydration forever. At some point, you're going to have to find some water. And the best way to find water in a desert is by leaving the desert. You get out of the desert, you go somewhere else where it's not a desert, where it's not deserted, where everyone hasn't gone up and left because they can't find any water. Of course, you're contributing to that because you're deserting the desert now, so you're adding to the exodus from the desert. All the people who've left because they couldn't find any water. If all those people had stayed and started a city, there would be water there. There would be water there. They have that thing in America, they have that thing in the desert. It's at Las Vegas, I believe it's called. Oh, there's hotels where you can go in and you say, hello, I want to feel special. I want to give you all my money and lose it. But while I'm losing it, I want to be made feel special so you can ply me with drinks. And you say, hello, would you like another drink? You're in the desert, remember, so you have to keep hydrated. You'll say, oh, yes, please, I better keep hydrated. I'm in the desert. Of course, that's where they get you. That's how that city started. I've just realised everyone was thirsty. So they started these hotels where everyone turns up. They've been walking through the desert to get to this place. In fact, they weren't even trying to get to this place. They just stumbled across it. And they were all thirsty. And staff came out of the hotels onto the beaches, or whatever you call the areas of sand in the desert. Maybe you don't call them a beach. And they said, sir, you look thirsty. Come in and have a drink. We'll give you a drink. Come into the hotel here. Have a drink in our casino. It's a casino. That's what it's called. Oh, what's a casino? And you say it's an area in a hotel where, well, it's kind of like, I'd like to call it a speakeasy, but I think that means something else. So I'll call it a casino. It's an area in a hotel where you can drink and not have to pay for it. It's great. Call it a drink easy. What's a speakeasy? I don't know what it is, but I come across that word in movies a lot. They say, oh, this is a speakeasy. There was a mobile phone company in Ireland in the 1990s. Their pay-as-you-go service was called Speakeasy. So maybe it's something to do with that. Maybe it's some place to go where you can say wherever you want. If you're a criminal, you can just say stuff and have a disposable phone. Do we have a desert here? I don't think so. We have a place called the Curragh. Now, it's not really in the middle of the country, but I would say it's in the middle of the area between the capital and the country. There's an area called the Curragh. There's an army base there, and there's a lot of sheep. It's more well known for its sheep than its army base, I would say. There's an area where you can drive around. There's a lot of flat land, and it's covered in signs saying, warning, there might be army drills going on here. You might get blown up if you're not careful. But there's also other signs saying the sheep who live around here, they're entitled to just walk around on the roads and you're not allowed to run them over. It's a special area. The sheep have just, oh, I don't know how it works, but they have loads of flat, open grass and sheep all over it, and they're just allowed to wander everywhere. So if you're a sheep, you're probably not a sheep though, are you? You're not a sheep. If you're a sheep, you wouldn't be listening to this. This is not a podcast for sheeps. This is a podcast for people who, well, for one thing, people who know that sheeps is not the plural of sheep. No, sheeps is the plural of, I suppose, if you were saying plural in terms of different types of sheep. I say there's 7 different varieties of sheep. You could say there's several sheeps, and sheep would be referring to a variety. But you wouldn't refer to, if it was just a few sheep you were talking about, you wouldn't say sheep. No. Well, I suppose it's like saying there's several pastas. People know damn well you're not saying, oh, there's several pasta quills there on the plate. No, you're talking about varieties of pasta. That's what you're talking about. It's exactly the same with sheep. Exactly the same. Almost identical. May as well be a clone of the same concept. Just like sheep are. Sheep are all the same. Huh? But I remember another thing that happened back in the 90s or maybe the 2000s. It came on the news one morning. I said, oh, they've cloned a sheep. We made a sheep out of another sheep. And I heard, oh Christ, they've cloned a sheep. We're in the future now. We're in the future. Soon we'll have the internet. And then we'll have flying cars. There was a book about the future I used to get out from Thomastown Library when I was a child. And it had pictures of what the future might look like. Flying cars and things like that. They had one picture that was, people's houses will have 2-story garages. The garage where they keep their car will have a basement in it. And they showed this basement. The floor of the garage was movable, a metal grill thing. And you can see the car parked in the basement level of the garage underneath it. You can walk around on that. And somehow, I presume it was a hydraulic lift or something. For some reason, that disturbed me as a child. I thought, that looks like a car that's being buried. It's like that Stephen King story. There was a Stephen King story about this rich fella going round in a car driving through the desert every day. And someone didn't like him and he spent ages planning how to trap him. He dug a hole in the desert and managed to trap him and bury him alive in his car. And that reminded me of that, even though I'd never read it. I was about 7 years old. I hadn't read this shit. But it reminded me of that now. Seeing a car in the basement under a metal grill floor thing, it looks like a bit like it's being buried. Would that not look like that to you? Because presumably there's concrete walls, so it looks like it's kind of in an underground tomb thing. No, you don't want that. Surely to Christ you don't want that in your future. I didn't want that in my future as a child. I used to get this book out from the library, from the children's library. I get it out regularly. For some reason I like this book. There's this book and Dr. Seuss's Wacky Races, which I still own a copy of. I didn't own a copy of it for about 30 years. Then a listener to this podcast heard me talking about it and sent me a copy of Wacky Races. So I have Dr. Seuss's Wacky Races available here for reading anytime I wish to look at it. I don't read it for the words. I don't like the words. I read it for the pictures. The pictures in Wacky Races. Well, I don't want to spoil them for you. Get yourself a copy of Dr. Seuss's Wacky Races. That illustrations in it by what's his name? I think it's Quentin something or other. Absolutely fucking... Oh no, not Wacky Races. Wacky Wednesday. Jesus Christ, have I been saying Wacky Races for the past 5 minutes? Do not listen to that shit. I do not condone Wacky Races. It's a perfectly adequate 1970s Hanna-Barbera television cartoon. But it's no Dr. Seuss. And don't watch any Dr. Seuss. But if it's Dr. Seuss, it's okay to just read it for the pictures. It's okay. It's not a copy of fucking Playboy. You're allowed to say, I can look at this just for the pictures if it's a Dr. Seuss book. Even if you're an adult, it's perfectly fine to say, I don't read this, I just like it for the pictures. Because the pictures are fucking amazing. If I were to get an audio book of Wacky Wednesday, I can tell you, I'd be saying, no, thank you. Don't need to hear the words because I know what the book is about. I know the story. It's not particularly complicated. I just want to look at the pictures. Get the book, put it on a stand right in front of your face. Like you would if you were conducting an orchestra. You get a big stand in front of you and you put the music in front of your face. And you also put a copy of the music in front of each of the performers' faces. Now, if they had done the movie like that, I don't mean put the scripts in front of all the actors' faces. I mean put the actual book with the pictures and say, this is what you're supposed to be performing. Person who's doing the voices of the Dr. Seuss characters, or even if it's not a cartoon. If you want to make a proper Dr. Seuss live action movie and you want the actors to do it properly, allow them to have the actual original book in front of them. Allow the actors to have the actual book in front of them. It's not illegal. I know it's going to be weird. The first live action movie where you see the actors actually holding the script or the original book in front of them. Well, that's fine. We all know this film is based on the book. We're trying to stretch it out to 90 minutes from a picture book. Respect the book by literally having it in everyone's hands. Once upon a time, there was a dog. A dog. A dog. Basically, a dog. And this dog, who's walking along the street one day, minding his own business, and then he noticed that the street was gone and he was in a fucking desert. And he thought, wait a minute, that can't be right. This must be a mirage. Because maybe it was. But wait, isn't a mirage? A mirage is a thing that happens in cartoons where they're in the desert and their mind is rotting because they're dehydrated or something. They'll see maybe a tank of water with a tap on it at the top of a hill and they say, oh, look, water. And then they run for it. And when they get there, it disappears because they were imagining it. Well, if you can do that with a bit of water in the middle of a desert, surely you can have a mirage that's the desert itself. You can imagine the desert. Maybe you're a fan of deserts and you're walking along a city street as this dog was, thinking, oh, I wish I was in a desert. And then you go on for miles more and you're not in the desert, but you're a bit dehydrated. It's a hot day and you think, oh, I'd love to be in a desert now. I hope there's a desert up here soon. Eventually you're going to see a mirage of a desert. That's what's going to happen. And that's what the dog is thinking. He's thinking, this isn't real. I've imagined this. It was a mirage of a desert. Maybe I could have a mirage within the mirage, whereby I think maybe there's a real desert within this mirage. If I walk through it for long enough, will that work? And the dog thinks to itself, it thinks, obviously not. That's fucking stupid. That's not worthy of me. That's a fucking ridiculous thing. Why do I even want to be in a desert anyway? It's a stupid place to be. That's where cats go to bury shit. And then they go to bury their heads or something. Is that the thing? They go to bury their heads and bury their shit. I don't know. They might go there to bury shit, but they don't go there to bury their heads. When they bury their heads in the desert, they're not doing it because they want to bury their heads. They're doing it because they're trying to survive, because it got so hot. They need to bury themselves during the midday sun to protect themselves from the heat a bit and try and survive. They're not doing that for enjoyment, I can tell you. No cat for recreational purposes is burying their head in sand where they know they've already buried their shit. No. Because when they buried their shit, for one thing, they weren't making a mental note. I must mark where I buried this in case I need to bury my head in the sand later and make sure I'm in a different region. No, they won't have done that because they won't have realised yet that they're going to be stranded in the desert for a while. So when they eventually realise they're stranded in the desert for a while and they better bury their head in the sand to avoid the height of the heat in the middle of the day, I only go, oh Christ, how do I know this isn't a part of the sand in the desert that I've used as a litter tray? There's no way of knowing until I smell it. And if I can smell it, then it's either too late or I've done a very bad job of burying it. That's why cats wouldn't do that, thinks the dog. But then the dog thinks, how does any of this help me? How does any of this help? It doesn't help me at all. I'm here walking through the city and have a mirage of a desert. And I realise it's a mirage, and yet it's still here somehow. How does that work? I suppose it's possible. I remember once when I was about 9 or 10 years old, I woke from a dream. I was aware I was still dreaming for the last 10 or 20 seconds of it, but I was also aware that I was waking up. So I could see the dream going on, but I was also aware that I was waking up. I suppose that could happen with a mirage, especially if you're a dog. I say especially if you're a dog. I mean, especially if you're not an intelligent human. Doesn't necessarily mean you have to be a dog. You could be any other lesser species in terms of intellect. You could be a snake. Although, wait, are snakes of lesser intellect? I don't know. But there's probably snakes in the desert. Now, would there be snakes in the mirage of a desert? That's the thing. Well, there might well be, because if a snake wandered into a city and was hoping to be back in the desert, I might see a mirage of a desert and think, oh, there it is, finally, I'll go for that. But it wouldn't be in the same mirage that you're in, because the mirage is inside your mind. It's not a place. So even if a snake did experience a mirage of a desert that wasn't real, it wouldn't be the same desert that you're in. No, that's not how it works at all. It's not how it works. And then the dog thinks, wait a minute. The desert is still here and it's a mirage. How does that work? I'm inside the mirage. What do I do now? Do I walk further into the desert mirage and then it'll disappear when I approach the middle? Is that how it works? Well, how far is that going to be? If I'm imagining a mirage of a desert, that means I really, really like deserts and want to be in one. So it stands to reason that the desert that I've imagined is going to be gigantic. It's probably millions of miles in diameter. So to get to the middle of it is going to take forever. So the mirage is not going to disappear until I get to it. I'm going to get to the middle of the desert. That's when it disappears. That's not practical at all. And then the dog thinks, wait a minute, the mirage isn't real. Why don't I just decide it's not there? Even if I can still see it, that's fine. It's not there. I know it's not there. And then the dog thinks, my dog brain isn't sophisticated enough to think like that. I have senses. My senses tell me what's there, and my senses at the moment are telling me that I'm in a desert. It's not going to disappear until I find my way out of it. And I'm not going to find my way out of it until I find the middle of it, which apparently I've decided is millions of miles away for some reason. I forget why now, but I'm sure it made sense at this time. Something about a mirage being there because I wanted to be there. And the mirage isn't going to disappear. Like the water, like seeing a tap of water that people see in the middle of the desert as a mirage, that doesn't disappear until they get to it. Well, my desert that I've imagined, because I want to be in a desert, isn't going to disappear until I get to the very middle of it. And because I like deserts, I've imagined a very, 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 very big desert, a very deep desert, and it's going to take millions of years for me to get to the center of it. And it's not going to disappear till then. I suppose I'll just have to think the desert is there, but it's not real, and ignore my senses. And if I'm going to ignore my senses, what do I not ignore? There's nothing else other than my senses. I ignore the smells and the sights and the sounds of the desert. What else is there? There's just blackness. So I ignore all my senses, and then there's just blackness. Except there isn't, because I'm seeing the desert, even though my eyes aren't seeing the desert because it's not there. So I've imaginary senses now. It's like the fifth, is it called the fifth sense or something? I don't know. It's fucking ridiculous. That's what it is, the dog says. And then the dog thinks, if I'm intelligent enough to figure out that this situation is ridiculous, then why am I not intelligent enough to be able to get myself out of it? And it thinks maybe it's because it's not one of those situations where intelligence is going to get you out of it. Well, that's good, because I'm not intelligent. I'm a dog. I'm a stupid dog. So that means I should be, maybe I have a good chance of getting myself out of here somehow. That's good. So maybe I'll figure something out. Or maybe the way I get out of it is by not being able to figure something out. Well, that seems to be what's happening now. So I look forward to being magically not here any second now. And by magically not here, I don't mean dead. I mean just the desert will go away. And that'll be great. That'll be great when that happens. I presume it will anyway. I can only assume. Until that happens, which is a bit weird. I can't imagine what that's going to be like until that happens, but I can imagine what it's like to be in a desert right now that I'm not even in. It doesn't even exist. How does that make any sense? It doesn't. And then the dog just stops and sits down and says, fuck it.
Into your head.
An ostrich will sometimes bury its head in the sand to fool predators because they'll see the ostrich neck and however many legs an ostrich has. Is it 2 or 4? I don't know. Or you should be asking if the ostrich has done this job properly and fooled predators properly. You'll be wondering, does an ostrich have 5 heads or 3? Or something along those lines. We have 2 or 3 ostrich eggs in this house, possibly down to 2 now because they're rather fragile. We have decorated ostrich eggs that we bought many, many years ago. And these things are fragile. And we have cats in this house. You don't put fragile ornaments around. So I was suggesting that the people who sell these painted ostrich eggshells should, instead of just having an eggshell, they should have a hard-boiled ostrich egg inside it. And what would happen then is that we would be honest about these souvenirs. So that's going to get broken at some point during your life. That's going to get broken. A cat is going to knock it off a mantelpiece or something. And you've forgotten to glue it down because you've moved house recently or something. I don't know. But we'll plan for that. We'll have as well as the interesting design or picture that's painted on the eggshell of the ostrich egg. There'll be another different picture or design on the white flesh, the white hard-boiled flesh of the egg inside, instead of just having a hollow eggshell. So when the egg finally does get broken, hopefully just the shell will get broken and then you'll be left with a whole new design inside that you can enjoy for another 10 or 15 years until that gets broken. And of course, there's going to be people who go, oh, I'm going to buy this. But if I'm going to buy this, I want to know what's the backup picture that's painted on the inside the shell, on the hard-boiled egg white inside. Because I want to know. I don't want it to be a surprise 15 years from now. And quite rightly, the people who make these and sell them are going to say, well, I'm very sorry, we don't have an X-ray camera here where we can show you a picture of what's inside the shell. You're going to have a surprise left in your life. If you don't like surprises, what you do is take extra good care of this ostrich egg so the egg shell never gets broken. So you never find out what the emergency backup painting is on the inside. And then, of course, someone is going to go, how in the name of Christ did you manage to paint the extra backup picture on the inside then? And they'll say, I don't know. I suppose in a way it was unrealistic in that way. But not to worry.
Are you going into your head?
Have a comment, question, or topic request? Email Neil anytime. studio@IntoYourHead.ie. studio@IntoYourHead.ie.
That's nearly the end of the roll of tape. It's nearly all used up. If I was to pull this another millimetre or two, it would probably end in disappointment because it would be all gone. So no, I won't. I want to use... Sometimes I have a use for a very short piece of electrical tape. So I'm keeping that. I have a use for it. I can't remember what it is now, but there is something that I occasionally use. Oh no, I don't do that anymore. Now that I think about it, no. I used to keep a roll of electrical tape beside me in bed. I use a lot of wireless Bluetooth earphones, and some of them have a very bright flashing light. I don't like it. Disturbs me, and it disturbs the other people in the room where I sleep sometimes. So I used to get a bit of electrical tape and stick it over that light. Problem is, beside that light there's a tiny little hole which serves as their microphone on that Bluetooth headset thing. And when you put a bit of black sticky tape on that, basically it clogs up the microphone part of that. Then someone tries to ring you about something important 3 days later, and you wonder why they can't hear you. And then you eventually, months and months later, as you've been doing this to every Bluetooth earphone set that you own, you realise, oh Christ, it's that fucking tape. And you may be thinking, why didn't I think about this straight away? Well, I don't use the mouthpiece a lot. I don't make a lot of phone calls or receive a lot of phone calls. So when I do, it's something important. If it's important enough to do over the phone, if it's important enough to drag me kicking and screaming into using voice telephony, then you can be damn sure that Christ is something very important, because I don't use the phone unless it's something very, very, very important. And frankly, if it was up to me, if it was something that was very, very, very important, I would do it not over the phone. Because I think important things should be done in writing, or maybe, perhaps. Whatever involves the least human interaction, I think, is how those things should be done. Be done in writing. I don't mean to put down writing and think that's no, quite the opposite. Writing is good. I've had letters published in the Irish Times, I'll have you know. I've had letters published in the Irish Times. That used to be something that was considered quite an adult thing to do. My father spent his whole life trying to get letters published in the Irish Times. I don't think he ever even succeeded, but I've had 2 or 3. I've also had some in other lesser newspapers. I had one in one of them about the coin ticket machines on the light rail system in Dublin. It's probably illegal to tell you what I said in the letter because the newspaper probably owns the content now, so I can't tell you what I said. Suffice to say, it was rather witty, and it got published. I've had a few like that. Obviously, they're all complete meaningless bollocks. There are other people who write to these newspapers and they have something to say, and for some reason they get away with filling up paragraphs and paragraphs and paragraphs and still get published. The rest of us mere mortals try to come up with a witty one-liner because we know that the editors will use those when they have a little gap to fill in the... It's not because of the content. They have a little gap to fill somewhere, so they like those. We know that's the only reason we get published. Of course, nowadays we all just start podcasts and just do verbal diarrhea for 45 minutes. I'm sure you're well aware of that. You're a podcast listener yourself. I assume you listen to podcasts. Anyway. If you don't, then I have a surprise for you regarding what's going on at the moment. Maybe you don't know you're listening to a podcast. Maybe you think this is just some fella in the room next door, in the next apartment. You've got very thin walls and there's some man in there who goes on about cats and burying heads in the desert and something about ostrich eggshells and all this stuff about getting a letter published in the Irish Times, which you admit is quite impressive. But you also think, oh, I thought it was quite impressive, but now he's just revealed that once he gets published at the short, witty one-liners, and those are the ones the editor uses to fill in the gaps. He's basically just plugging holes in a sinking ship. As if he found one of his letters in a boat, he'd use it to plug a little hole. You'd be turning it straight into papier mâché then, because it was on newspaper. To plug a hole with that, the water's going to be attacking it. And how does that, can you do that? Can you plug a hole in a boat with newspaper? Papier mâché would work, but you'd have to let the papier mâché dry first before you use it, surely. You can't just stuff the newspaper into it and say, oh, the water that's going through that will make the paper wet and then it'll turn to papier mâché and then it'll solidify. That's not how that works. Papier mâché has to dry. I know this. I've told you this before. My parents used to make paper briquettes for the central heating. You had this contraption and you'd make bricks out of old newspapers. You'd soak them in water and then you'd turn them into bricks and then you'd let them dry in the sun. And we did that. That's not going to work. You can't do that on a boat. You can't make a papier mâché plug. Or maybe you can. Now that I think about it, no. I'm underthinking this. Because maybe the hole in the boat that you're trying to plug isn't in the bottom of the boat and you're not trying to stop it sinking. It's just a hole in the side of the boat near the top that you want to plug because it's causing a bit of a draft. It's not causing the boat to sink. Maybe then you can plug that with a bit of wet newspaper and it'll dry out. If you shelter it, I don't know. I'm talking about how you want to plug a hole in a sinking boat. And I just realised when I said that, I was talking about... It was a metaphor. I wasn't really talking about a sinking boat. I was talking about the newspaper industry, obviously. You use my little witty one-line letters to plug a hole in your sinking industry. Which now that I think about it sounds a bit big-headed of me. Oh well, not to worry. I know what you're thinking there. You're thinking he's being rather immodest, going on about how he got a letter published in the newspaper. And not just a newspaper, the Irish Times, the paper of record. That's what newspaper people used to call it here. They said the Irish Times is the paper of record. If something happens in the times in which we live in, it automatically gets entered into this. It's like that thing people talk about. People who are into mystic stuff, they say there's everything gets recorded in a thing. It's like a magical library thing, and everything that happens anywhere in the universe gets recorded and put down, and you can look it up if you have access to it. You can look it up in this thing. It's like the Library of Alexandria, except psychics go there and look stuff up. And the people used to talk about the Irish Times like that. It says, the paper of record. You want to look up what happened at 6 a.m. on the 12th of November 1982. You get out the Irish Times not the Irish Times for that day, the following weekly after that. Or if it happens on a Saturday, get the Monday. If it happens on a Friday, get the Saturday edition. I don't know if it'll be in that because that's the weekend edition. I don't know if it has news in it. But if you want to look up what happened at 4 a.m. on the 15th of November 1982, you look it up in the next day's Irish Times newspaper, and it'll be I worked in a library for a while. I used to keep these newspapers. Every day we get every edition of every newspaper every day. We bring them in, we get 2 copies. One of the staff was equipped with a pair of scissors, and they go through these newspapers and they cut out any bits that would be of interest to the senior staff in this organisation that they needed to know about it. And they'd staple it into a little folder, and then they'd send it up and say, here's the clippings from the newspapers, the bits we cut out because they were so important. And then you'd get the remaining newspaper that the things had been cut out of. You didn't know what to do to them. I suppose if there had been a bit of imagination in that organisation, we could have sold the clippings to some other organisation whose interests were the exact opposite of those of the organisation we were working in. For example, this was the Department of Agriculture. So if there had been a Department of Anti-Agriculture that has interest in everything except agriculture, I had no interest in any news about agriculture but needed to know about everything else, we could have sold these papers to them. Now, what they would have done with them, I don't know. Do they clip all of the other articles out and paste them into a little book? You can't just give your boss a newspaper where all the non-relevant things cut out. So the big hole. For one thing, it's hard to do that. Now, I did this clippings thing for a while. You get to an article that you need to cut out. You cut it out. If it's on the side or the corner of a page and you cut that out, then you leave a big floppy bit. And it's a mess. If it's in the middle of the page, that's the best one, because if you're careful, you can cut out the article, but the page still retains some structural integrity. So if someone has a use for what's left of that newspaper, at least they don't feel ridiculous using it. If you're standing on a train and you're looking through this newspaper and you get to a part where a whole corner of the page is being cut out and everything is just flopping down, you look ridiculous. Other people are seeing you on this train and they say, oh no, that fella. I need to actively find out what industry he's in, just to make sure that if he ever comes to apply for a job in my business, I not consider him. That's how LinkedIn was created. People used to see these people on trains and they say, oh, how do I make sure I never accidentally employ him or do business with him? I don't know who he is. I need an app so I can look him up. I never used a LinkedIn app for anything important, but if I did, I imagine that the way it works is you discreetly point your camera at them and it scans them and tries to recognize them. And if that doesn't work, it scans whatever newspaper they're reading or any text it can find around them. If there's anything non-confidential, of course, but you can scan the newspaper that they're reading because that's not confidential. A newspaper is a public thing. Well, the outside of it is public. Anyone can see the outside of a newspaper on a newspaper stand or online. The inside may be somewhat confidential in that it's not private, but you can't just read it without stealing it. So I suppose there's that. I presume the LinkedIn app, it scans what they're reading as long as it's not secret documents. It's this newspaper or something. You say, oh, this is what he's reading. We'll find some clues here about where he works. And usually you pick up something from that. And then you can mark him off in your LinkedIn app saying, don't take any applications from him. That's probably illegal, you know. There's laws against that. You're probably not allowed to do that now. You're not allowed to preemptively block someone from a job that you haven't advertised yet because it hasn't come up yet and you don't even know who they are. Well, of course, there's a good chance. If you're that person, they're doing you a service. Because if I'm reading a newspaper, minding my own business on the train, and some professional sees me and thinks, oh, I never want to employ him, that person is doing me a favor if they block me. Because I don't want to work for someone who doesn't want me working for them. How would that be a good thing? That would be a bad thing. There are people miserable in jobs all over the country where they were employed by someone who wouldn't want to employ them if they had a choice, and vice versa. And they end up like that. That's why LinkedIn got invented. So it's great. Well done, LinkedIn. That's fantastic. Who owns it now? Is it Rupert Murdoch or someone? I don't know. Someone owns LinkedIn. Or is it Microsoft? Some big thing bought LinkedIn a few years ago, if I remember rightly, which I may well not. It was either Rupert Murdoch or Fox or Disney or Microsoft or Apple or LiveJournal or someone. Who the fuck bought it? I don't know who bought LinkedIn. Maybe I'm confusing it with LiveJournal or something. I don't know. Or Bebo. Either Bebo or Bebo was bought by. Oh no, that was MySpace. I don't know. Does it really matter? It probably doesn't. Well then why do you have an app for it? You have this LinkedIn app supposed to be for the stuff that matters. Incidentally, this podcast has a LinkedIn feed. You can look me up on LinkedIn. I put Into Your Head shorts on it sometimes. Video clips containing sounds from this program of segments. I put them up there. Oh, they do very well. Some of them get a dozen likes or a dozen views anyway. I don't know. A view is probably a different thing from a like. A view is when someone sees you. A like is when someone approves of seeing you. There is a difference, I know. There is a difference. Someone seeing you is not the same as someone liking you. And if they like you and they haven't seen you, then they're dishonest. So there should be a way to flag that on an app. Every social media app should have a way of saying, oh, this person liked you, but they haven't seen you. They have no idea who or what you are. They've just pressed like somewhere because they thought this will help me in some way in my endeavours, wherever they're up to. Some scheme. Because everyone on social media, they're into some scheme or other. There is some scheme to either get likes or get approval. Or the latest thing, of course, now among the older people is to say when someone puts a picture of their cat online or a little funny cat video, they're using for recreational purposes that little chemical that your brain makes when someone approves of something that you do. Bear in mind that the people who are judging you for this are the same people who got addicted to television, cocaine, war, alcohol, drugs, cars, it's all those other things. Those people, they go, oh, look, you're addicted to that little chemical that your brain releases when someone likes your cat on Twitter. You're a disgusting, you should be in a rehab place. Those people were doing drugs while you were still in nappies. In fact, if they'd been around, there's probably a time when they would have happily sniffed your nappy if they thought it could turn into a drug. These people used to sniff glue. Your parents' generation, they thought, is there some way you can turn that into a legal high? And I sniff that. That's how desperate I am. No. The young people now, they do it naturally. They get a bit of dopamine, that's what it's called. Dopamine. They find some way to be creative. They make a cat video and they find people who like it. And that gives them, and then as a result, their brain generates a bit of dopamine, the most natural thing in the world. But no, the people who sniffed glue and watched television for 12 hours a day in the 1980s, fuck them. Don't listen to them. You tell them, excuse me, your generation was addicted to television when it was full of situation comedies and dollars. So fuck that shit. Anyway, good morning.